The morning started like any other Tuesday. Jake Morrison finished his coffee and grabbed his hard hat from the kitchen counter. Outside his Chicago apartment, the city hummed with its usual noise. Cars honked, people rushed to work, and construction cranes dotted the skyline. Jake was a construction worker, building the new office tower on Franklin Street. It was honest work, and he was good at it. 3,000 miles away in Nevada, Dr. Helen Carter sat in her office at the NASA research facility. She studied satellite images on 3 different screens. Helen had worked at NASA for 12 years, tracking atmospheric anomalies and space debris. This morning, something strange appeared on her monitors. The air above the desert seemed to shimmer and twist in ways that made no sense. "Are you seeing this?" her colleague asked from across the room. Helen leaned closer to the screen. "That's not weather. That's not anything I've ever seen before." Lisa had been a cop for 8 years, and she prided herself on keeping people safe. She noticed the small things, the details that others missed. Then the sky tore open. Helen watched her screen in horror as a massive rift split the air above the Nevada desert. It looked like reality itself was being unzipped. Purple and black energy crackled along the edges of the tier. And then something stepped through. It was a giant. No, giant was too small a word. The creature stood 50 meters tall, as high as a 15-story building. It had a vaguely human shape with 2 arms, 2 legs, and a head. But its skin looked like dark gray stone, rough and cracked. Its eyes glowed with a dull red light. The Titan took 1 step forward, and the ground shook for miles in every direction. Helen's hands trembled as she reached for the emergency phone. "We have a situation. Unknown entity has appeared in Sector 7. It's massive. It's moving." Tokyo, London, Sydney, Mumbai, Rio de Janeiro, Moscow, Johannesburg. The rifts were opening everywhere, hundreds of them, thousands of them, and through each rift more Titans emerged. Jake was climbing scaffolding when he heard the screams. He looked up and saw it towering over the Chicago skyline. The Titan walked through buildings like they were made of paper. Glass and concrete exploded with each step. The creature paid no attention to the destruction it caused. It simply walked forward with slow, deliberate movements. "Everyone down, now!" Jake shouted to his crew, but it was already too late. The Titan's foot came down on the adjacent building. The structure collapsed in seconds, sending a cloud of dust and debris across the street. Jake grabbed the nearest worker and pulled him toward the fire escape. "Move! Go, go, go!" People ran in every direction, screaming and crying. Lisa's training kicked in immediately. "Everyone, listen to me," she shouted above the chaos. "Get away from the tall buildings, head to the subway stations. Underground now." She led groups of civilians toward the nearest subway entrance, urging them to run faster. Behind her, she heard the terrible sound of breaking glass and crumbling concrete. Helen watched the satellite feeds in disbelief. The Titans were appearing in every major city on Earth. They moved with purpose, targeting the most populated areas first. Within minutes, communications started failing. Cell towers collapsed. Power grids went dark. The internet flickered and died in region after region. "They're destroying our infrastructure," Helen said to anyone who would listen. "This isn't random. They know what they're doing. They're going to try to bomb these things. Pack what you can and head to the bunker." She copied files on the Titan energy signatures, their movement patterns, and the dimensional rift readings. Her hands moved quickly across the keyboard even as the building shook around her. Jake made it to street level with 15 people from his construction site. They huddled in the shadow of a parking garage, watching in horror as the Titan walked past them. Up close, it was even more terrifying. The creature's skin looked ancient and weathered, like it was carved from a mountain. Steam or smoke seemed to drift from the cracks in its surface. Its footsteps left deep craters in the concrete. A little boy, maybe 7 years old, stood crying in the middle of the street. His mother must have lost him in the panic. The Titan was walking straight toward him. Jake didn't think, he just ran. He scooped up the child and dove behind an overturned bus just as the Titan's foot came down where they had been standing. The impact threw them both several feet, but they were alive. "I've got you," Jake whispered to the terrified child. "You're okay, I've got you." The Titans walked the surface like they owned it, and maybe they did. Nobody knew how many people were left alive. Millions, maybe, not billions anymore. Jake Morrison sat in the darkness of the Chicago subway tunnels. Around him, 200 people tried to live in the shadows. They had mattresses spread on the concrete platforms. Battery-powered lanterns gave just enough light to see by. Children whispered instead of playing. Everyone had learned that noise meant death. A woman named Dr. Helen Carter had joined their group a week ago. She arrived with a damaged laptop and a backpack full of hard drives. She said she was from NASA, that she had been studying the Titans since they first appeared. Jake didn't care much about her credentials. What mattered was that she was smart and she wanted to help. Helen sat cross-legged on the platform, her laptop balanced on her knees. The battery was dying, maybe 2 hours of power left. She had to use it carefully. Jake walked over and sat down beside her. "Finding anything useful?" he asked quietly. Helen rubbed her tired eyes. "Maybe. I've been analyzing their movement patterns. They're not random, Jake. The Titans follow specific routes. They avoid certain areas. Look at this. Every survivor group that's managed to contact us is hiding below ground. The Titans can't detect us down here. It interferes with technology, but the Earth's magnetic field interferes with them. Down here, we're invisible." Danny had lost his parents on the first day, but he hadn't given up. Instead, he made himself useful. "Jake, we've got a problem," Danny said. "The food storage is almost empty, maybe 3 more days if we're careful." "We'll figure it out, we always do." Lisa Chen was checking her weapons in the corner. The police officer had become their best scout. She knew how to move quietly, how to read danger before it arrived. She had kept dozens of people alive with her skills. "I'll take a team up tonight," Lisa said without looking up from her pistol. Not that the gun would do anything against a Titan, but it made her feel better to have it. "There's a convenience store 3 blocks north that might not be picked clean yet." Her eyes were hard but kind. "You became a leader the moment you started putting everyone else first. That's what leaders do." Now he treated injuries with whatever supplies they could scavenge. His medical bag was nearly empty. "We have another problem," Peter said quietly. "Mrs. Henderson's daughter is getting worse. The infection is spreading. Without proper antibiotics, she might not make it through the week. Add it to the supply list." Helen continued her research, making the most of her dying laptop battery. She discovered something else in the data, something that made her blood run cold. The Titans were building something, large structures made of melted rock and metal. She didn't know what they were for, but it couldn't be good. Danny sat with a group of younger children, telling them stories to keep them calm. He talked about superheroes and brave knights, about good guys who always won in the end. The children listened with wide eyes, desperate to believe in happy endings. 4 hours later, Lisa's team returned. They brought back canned food, bottled water, and a small supply of medical materials. But they also brought back something else: terror in their eyes. "You need to see this," Lisa said to Jake. She pulled out her phone and showed him a video she had recorded. The footage was shaky but clear enough. 2 Titans fighting each other in the middle of downtown. They smashed into buildings, threw pieces of concrete like weapons, and roared with sounds that shook the camera. One Titan grabbed the other and literally tore its arm off. Dark liquid poured from the wound, smoking when it hit the ground. "They're fighting each other," Jake said in disbelief. Helen rushed over to see the video. Her mind raced as she watched. "This changes everything. They're not a unified force. They have conflicts, maybe territories. If they fight among themselves." And now, maybe, they had found their first real advantage. "We need to learn more," he said. "We need to understand them if we're going to survive this." She watched the Titan fight dozens of times, taking notes on every detail. The way they moved, the way they attacked, the dark liquid that poured from their wounds. Jake brought her extra batteries for her laptop, precious resources that people usually saved for emergencies. But this was an emergency. "Look at this part," Helen said, calling Jake and Lisa over to her screen. She played the video in slow motion. "See how the injured Titan moves slower after losing its arm? Its movements become stiff, almost frozen. More than that, they react to damage differently than we expected. That fluid coming from the wound, it evaporates quickly in our atmosphere. I think these creatures aren't built for Earth's environment. They can survive here, but it costs them something. Jake, there's a radio signal. Someone's trying to reach us. Any survivors in the Chicago area, please respond. We have secured a location. We have supplies. Please respond." "What's your position?" "We'll need time to prepare," Jake said into the radio. "What kind of supplies do you have?" "We'll find a way." Kevin Barnes, a former engineer in their group, had an idea. He remembered that the bunker Captain Bennett described had industrial cooling systems. Big ones, used to keep computer servers from overheating. If cold affects the Titans, Kevin said, maybe we can weaponize it. Build something that slows them down. Lisa led a team of 10 people, including Jake, who refused to stay behind this time. They moved through the ruined city like ghosts. Silent, careful, always watching the sky for the massive silhouettes of Titans. The creatures seemed most active during the day, so they traveled in the darkest hours before dawn. They found a warehouse district that hadn't been completely destroyed. One building still stood mostly intact. It had been a frozen food distribution center. Perfect for what they needed. Jake and Kevin headed inside while Lisa and the others kept watch. The refrigeration units were dead without power, but the components they needed were still there. Copper coils, coolant tanks, pressure valves. Kevin filled his backpack with parts, muttering calculations to himself. That's when they heard it, the sound of footsteps, heavy footsteps that made the ground shake. Lisa signaled everyone to freeze. Through the broken windows, they saw a Titan approaching. It was searching, moving its massive head from side to side like it sensed something but couldn't quite locate it. "Everyone inside the freezer truck," Lisa whispered urgently. "Now." 12 people crammed into a space meant for frozen goods. They pulled the door closed, leaving just a crack to see through. The Titan came closer. Its footsteps rattled their bones. Through the crack in the door, they watched it stop right next to their truck. The creature stood perfectly still for a moment. Then it bent down, its glowing red eyes scanning the area. Jake held his breath. Beside him, a young man named Carlos started shaking. The fear was overwhelming. Being this close to a Titan was like standing next to death itself. The Titan's hand reached down, fingers as thick as tree trunks. It grabbed a collapsed building and lifted it, tossing the debris aside like it was searching for something. Everyone in the truck pressed against the walls, trying to make themselves smaller. Hours passed. The Titan wouldn't leave. It kept searching the area, destroying everything around them. Inside the truck, the air grew hot and stale. People started sweating. A woman began breathing too fast, panic setting in. Lisa put her hand over the woman's mouth gently. "Breathe slowly," she mouthed silently. "Stay calm." "Please," Jake whispered directly into Carlos's ear. "Please stay quiet, for everyone here, please." They were discovered, but then another sound came from across the warehouse district. Another Titan. The first one turned its head, stood up, and walked away toward the new arrival. Within minutes, the two Titans were fighting each other, their battle taking them further from the warehouse. Lisa waited 30 more minutes before opening the truck door. "Everyone out, quick and quiet, we're leaving now." Kevin had his parts, they had food, nobody had died, but Jake knew they had used up their luck for the day. The journey to the government bunker took 3 nights. Jake organized the 200 survivors into groups of 20. Each group traveled separately with several hours between them. It was slow and dangerous, but it was the only way to avoid drawing attention. Helen traveled with the first group, carrying her laptop and precious data. Danny walked beside her, helping her navigate through the darkness. The boy had sharp eyes and quick reflexes. More than once he spotted Titans in the distance before anyone else did. "There," Danny whispered, pointing to the horizon. 2 of them maybe a mile away. Lisa led the second group, keeping everyone moving at a steady pace. She had mapped out a route that used drainage tunnels and old service roads, paths that kept them below ground as much as possible. A young girl named Sophie Martinez stayed close to Lisa the whole way. Sophie was 10 years old and hadn't spoken since losing her family, but she followed Lisa's instructions perfectly. Jake brought up the rear with the final group. He made sure the elderly and injured made it safely. Doctor. Peter Walsh walked beside him, helping those who struggled with the journey. "Do you really think this bunker will be better?" Peter asked quietly. "It has to be," Jake said. "We can't survive another winter in those subway tunnels." The bunker was built into the side of a hill, hidden by trees and rocks. Inside, it had multiple levels going deep underground. Generator rooms, storage areas, communications equipment, and living quarters that could house hundreds of people. "Welcome," Roy said, shaking Jake's hand. "We've been alone here for weeks. It's good to see more survivors." Old government servers still had power from the bunker's backup generator. He pulled up classified military files. "We found these after evacuating our base." Roy explained. The military studied the Titans for the first 2 weeks before everything fell apart. They tested every weapon we had. Nothing worked, but they discovered something important. And they had found something crucial. The rifts are unstable, Helen said, reading the data. They're collapsing. They estimate the rifts will close completely within 6 to 8 months. So if we can just survive long enough. The military had studied the composition of Earth's air and compared it to the energy signatures from the rifts. The Titans came from somewhere else, somewhere with a different atmosphere. Earth's air was slowly poisoning them. Kevin arrived at the computer room, excited about what he had found in the bunker's maintenance areas. The cooling systems here are perfect. Give me 2 weeks and I can build a prototype weapon, something that shoots concentrated cold. Maybe not kill them, but it might slow them down enough that we can escape when we need to. The adults organized work crews. Some maintained the generators, others managed food distribution. Everyone had a role. Helen worked with Roy's communications specialist, trying to contact other survivor groups. They sent out radio signals every hour. Sometimes they got responses. A group in Denver, another in Minneapolis, scattered communities of humans hiding underground, all fighting to stay alive. But then the Titans found them. It started with tremors. The bunker shook as heavy footsteps approached from above. Roy sent scouts to the surface. They came back with terrible news. Dozens of Titans were converging on their location. How did they find us? Jake demanded. Helen checked her instruments. The generator, it's putting out too much electromagnetic energy. They can detect it. There are old mining tunnels half a mile east. We can reach them if we move now. I need more time. The elderly were helped by the young. Everyone took only what they could carry. Helen saved her data on portable drives. Peter packed medical supplies. Above them, the Titans began tearing into the hillside. They ripped trees from the ground. They smashed rocks aside. The bunker's ceiling started to crack. Roy's soldiers took positions at the bunker entrance, weapons ready even though they knew bullets wouldn't help. Jake stood with them. The civilians poured through the back tunnels of the bunker. Lisa led them forward with flashlights and glow sticks, marking the path to the old mining system. Danny and Sophie helped the younger children, making sure nobody got left behind. Helen carried her equipment and helped an elderly woman navigate the rough terrain. Behind them, the sound of destruction grew louder. The Titans were tearing the bunker apart, ripping through concrete and steel like it was cardboard. Roy's soldiers fired their weapons knowing it would do nothing, just trying to buy a few more minutes for people to escape. Jake stood at the rear of the evacuation, counting people as they passed. 297, 298, 299. One person missing. He looked back and saw Kevin running through the collapsing bunker, clutching his prototype weapon. Kevin, leave it, we have to go. It looked like a large fire extinguisher connected to copper coils and a pressure tank. He turned the valve and the device started humming. Got it, Kevin yelled triumphantly. Then the ceiling came down. A huge piece of concrete fell directly on Kevin. Jake tried to run back for him, but Roy grabbed him and pulled him away. He's gone, we have to move. He ran back, grabbed the device, and sprinted toward the tunnel as the entire bunker collapsed behind him. The mining tunnels were old and dangerous, but they led deep into the earth where the Titans couldn't follow. The survivors traveled for hours through the darkness, putting distance between themselves and the surface. Finally, Lisa found a large chamber where they could rest. People collapsed on the ground, exhausted and terrified. They had lost the bunker, their first real shelter. They had lost Kevin, and they had lost most of their supplies, but they were alive. Jake set down Kevin's prototype and examined it. The device was still working. Helen came over to look at it with him. He finished it, she said quietly. He actually finished it before he died. Look, the rift measurements show they're collapsing faster than expected. Maybe 4 more months. We just need to survive 4 more months and no new Titans can arrive. That's just dying slowly. Maybe, Roy admitted. But we have something now, Kevin's weapon. We have knowledge about how they fight each other. We have hundreds of survivor groups across the country. What if we coordinate? What if we all start fighting back at the same time? Just to survive long enough for those rifts to close. Small teams would emerge from underground at night, using Kevin's prototype as a template to build more cold weapons. The devices didn't kill Titans, but they slowed them down enough to make a difference. Helen and Roy's communications specialist contacted every survivor group they could find. Slowly, a network formed. Groups in Boston shared information with groups in Atlanta. Survivors in Seattle coordinated with those in Portland. Humanity wasn't organized like before, but they were connected again. Lisa trained civilians in guerrilla tactics, quick strikes and fast retreats. Never stay in one place too long. Danny and Sophie, despite their young age, became excellent scouts. They were small, quiet, and brave beyond their years. The Titans continued their work on the surface, building their strange structures from melted rock and metal. But now humans sabotaged their efforts, destroying resources, collapsing their buildings, making every step of their invasion harder. Helen watched the rift data obsessively. 3 months passed, then 4, then 5. The rifts were definitely closing. She could measure it precisely now. No new Titans had arrived in weeks. But the existing Titans became more aggressive. Maybe they knew their connection to home was dying. Maybe they were desperate. They hunted harder, destroyed more, pushed deeper underground. The resistance lost people, dozens, then hundreds. But they also saved thousands by disrupting Titan operations and helping survivor groups escape danger. 6 months after the invasion began, Helen's instruments showed something incredible. The last dimensional rift closed. She broadcast the news to every survivor group on their network. The doors are shut. No more Titans are coming. Earth's atmosphere slowly poisoned them. They became slower, more confused. One by one they fell. It took 3 more years, but eventually the last Titan collapsed. 10 years after the invasion, Jake stood in what used to be Chicago. The city was being rebuilt, different than before, but alive again. Survivors had emerged from underground. They planted gardens in the ruins. They built homes from salvaged materials. Children played in the streets. Lisa worked as a teacher now, training young people in history and survival skills. Helen led a team of scientists studying the dead Titans and closed rifts, making sure it could never happen again. Danny was 22 now, teaching the next generation about resilience. Earth's population was only 400 million. They had lost so much. But humanity had survived by adapting, by refusing to give up, and by protecting each other. They weren't the strongest species, but they were the most stubborn. And sometimes that was enough. Claude is AI and can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.